Hey guys, welcome back to Nursing Home Insider. Today it's a biggie. Everybody knows the system is broken. The staff, families, everybody. So I've been inside for a long time, and we know what needs to change and how do we fix it. So this is kind of what we want to talk about today. I think that obviously the staffing ratios, number one, that has to change. I looked up some statistics. There's a site, I'm going to link it below, that you can look for your state. Here in Louisiana, all it says is sufficient staff. Doesn't even have a ratio. So some states 20 is okay. And others, there are some that were really good with 6 to 8 mandated already. But you can look and see what your state's ratio is. 20 is so not even acceptable. Sufficient staff is not acceptable. That just kind of leaves it in this administration's hands as what's okay and what isn't. So basically 20 residents to one CNA or 35 residents to one nurse. So that's not acceptable. Realistic, I think 6 to 8 is okay. I had somebody on TikTok tell me that was too many. It's not a one-on-one job. I could handle 12 and do a really good job. So, it just depends on how hard you want to work, I guess. Some examples I can think of many, many, many times. We work short-staffed. And then, and I've talked about those before. But when you do, and when I ended up with 20 residents, it is impossible to give them the best care. However, I would do the best I could to get it done without, stopping because it is a calling. It was whatever. It was a calling for me. It wasn't a job. And so here's a funny thing I read yesterday. And actually, it might be the answer. So it's about AI and the robots and how they might use them to be the caregivers for old people in the nursing homes. So, I see CNAs on TikTok all the time. I'm trying to, watch their attitudes and what they say, and you can see the ones that have a heart for it and the others that it's a job. And to me, that is just not a job. So if you don't want to be there, please don't be there, because somebody's mom or dad or grandma is going to be a whole lot better off if you just have a bad attitude about going to work and doing that for them. But if it's your calling, then it's very important that you do the best you can. So if AI is going to come in and take over and be CNAs, I can see that happening because, we talked about in another video about the baby boomers. And so in the next 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to just explode. And if you don't have that many people that have that calling, then what are you going to do? It's just going to get worse. So they're going to have to step in and do something. So the CNA staff ratios have to be fixed one way or the other. Whether they get AI to do it or not. Okay? Now, what are the best ways to keep CNAs and nurses? Everybody out there that's a CNA and a nurse, I know you can answer all these. First of all, the benefits need to be good. The pay needs to be good. I was watching another TikTok the other day, and some of the girls get paid really good money in some of these states. And then others, it's awful. And even those in-home, like at home or whatever those caregivers are, they charge the family so much, and then they only pay the girls to go in the home that they pay them $8, $9, $10. That's just ridiculous. So we have to pay people what they're worth. If you want good CNAs, you're going to have to pay them. You're going to have to give them benefits. They need training and career advancement. Whether if they wanted to be a nurse from a CNA, offer them to pay for their Education, a step up. I know lots of nursing homes pay for them to get their CNA license, and that's great. And then if they want to be a nurse, they should help them do that too. Working conditions, and I think of this as, if I'm going to go do my job, then the place needs to provide me everything I need for my job. All the equipment needs to be good. They need to have plenty of gloves all the time and wipes and everything that a CNA needs to do her job. Then that place needs to provide that. And there has to be some kind of oversight there as well. And we're going to get to the answers in a minute. So I also think that CNAs need a voice, and we're going to get to that in another point later on. So, turnover with the CNAs is so high in most places. I've had some people respond in comments on TikTok about how they love their job and there's not much turnover. And like I said, there are great places out there that people stay for a long time. But the CNAs have the hardest, most personal job in the nursing home. And sometimes it is the lowest pay. So we need to pay them what they're worth. And there needs to be some standard for that. And there again, that's like a little caveat, because if you're going to pay that much, then you better expect that much out of them. I mean, there's people that want to get paid that much for not doing anything or having a bad attitude and shouldn't be there. So it's a catch-22. It's very hard. So, but that's definitely an issue. Okay. So point 3, the leadership in the nursing homes, they've got to leave the office. Now, I don't know. Great administrators and directors of nursing are always on the floor, walking the halls. They know the residents. They know the staff. They pitch in and help. I've had some bad and some good over the years, and I'll just say that staff stays for good leadership. If you've got a good person in charge, then you're not going to have that turnover. But bad leadership, people are going to leave. So, and the best administrator I've ever worked under, and I worked under her for a while, and then I left, and then she called me to come back, and I did. And, she was always available to the residents. She was available to the staff. She was on the floor. She was just a great person. And I think now this new person hasn't even left the office. I talked to the residents a lot, and they didn't even know they had a new administrator. So, if you don't leave the office, how are you going to know who your residents are? How are you going to know what's going on with your staff? That's definitely something that has to happen, and that should be a mandate. And I remember the very first job I had as social service director way back in the 80s, and his name was Ken. I can't remember his last name, but he was amazing, and he was always on the floor, and all the residents loved him, and the staff loved him, and so there wasn't a big turnover even back then. And that was like right after the CARE Act passed, where people weren't tied to their chairs anymore with sheets. So that's point 3. Point 4 has to do with families. I think that the nursing homes need to be transparent with the families. It's just like we talked about when they come in on a tour and you kind of hide everything and make the place look better, and you don't really tell them the nitty-gritty truth. And you need to be transparent about the staffing issues, not try to cover it up. So maybe it needs to be posted, and there are some states that do that. Every shift, have it posted, who's on staff and how many there are to each resident, because there again, that goes back to the first issue with the CNAs. Real oversight. Okay, so here, this is where you get into politics more or less. I've really done some research in here I've talked to my state ombudsman, who is amazing, and she does a lot to help people. But you've got the state that comes in to these places. They do an annual visit, and you usually know when your window is and kind of when they're coming. So that's kind of, you all get ready for that one. They do some pop-ins, and most of the time it's because somebody's called. If somebody calls and reports a problem or a complaint, then the state has to come in and investigate it. Okay, so they're pop-ins, but they're not really pop-ins. But they do come in, and you don't know they're coming. That happens a lot. There's lobbyists and lawmakers that are really strong, that fight for the elderly. So we've just got the National Consumer Voice for Aging. Okay, write that down. The AARP Public Policy, they're making some changes. The Justice in Aging. These are just some groups that are doing stuff for the elderly. They're the ones that fight for the nursing home. Like in 1987, there was the Nursing Home Reform Act. And like I said just a second ago, that's when, they changed from you can't tie people down anymore, and, it's against their rights, which of course it is. And now we've gone to the opposite extreme where you can't even put a bed rail on a bed because that's keeping them tied down, restraining them. So, it's just a fine line, I think. But here we go. The Care for Our Seniors Act. As I just looked this up, it just is a bipartisan bill that was just started April of this year, 2025. Okay. And it does help, like the staffing issues. You can look it up, but I think what we want to do is call our state representatives and tell them to support this bill. That's one way we can do this. Okay. There are things that we can do besides, you can write to your state lawmaker and tell them to support this bill. And you can share info from the above organizations with other people. I'm going to put all these down in the links. Okay. So if you are interested in stuff like this, then we need to speak up. Okay. But the last point is a Cna Council. I was a Cna for years. We never had a council. We never really had a voice, so the nurses and the DONs, we would get together and they would tell us, what we needed to do, which is all fine and good. But like I said, the CNAs are really the heart and the soul of a nursing home. And if you have a good staff there that love the residents and make it enjoyable for them, then it can be a great place. So if you have a council with CNAs, maybe, I can give you a printout of how it should work. I can put that down below too. Okay, so maybe if you're a CNA listening to this and you want to start a CNA council, just do it. I don't even know that you have to have the DON's permission. Maybe you do. But just something you can just CNAs get together once a month and you meet, and then one of you, whoever's in charge, would be the one to go to the DON and the administrator and share your concerns, so that you do have a voice, and maybe hopefully that your staff would listen, your administrator and your DON would be open to listening to what you had to say. If not, I would think I would go get another job. But if the lawmakers want solutions to this, they're going to have to listen to the people in the scrubs, because they're the ones that know. This isn't about blaming anybody, especially the staff that's trying to hold it together. Usually comes down from administration. Whether, like I said, if they're not walking the halls and they don't care, then how can they expect their staff to care? Families, lawmakers, we've all got to work together and speak up, because it's not going to change without us speaking up. Okay. And last, like I said, if this matters to you, like it does to me, we need to share it. We need to talk about it, and we need to write our lawmakers about it, because if not, AI may take over and take care of your mom. And it may be, I love my AI. She is very helpful to me. So I can see that can be something that's going to happen in the future. And then, you don't ever have to worry about bad tempers or people losing patience, because AI is not going to do that. So what is your opinion on that? I'd like to hear it in the comments. People versus AI taking care of your mom or you or me one day in the near future. So thanks for listening, and hopefully we can make changes soon in this system. Thanks.